let me see what I will give the background why it's important, and then how my presentation objectives and the flame studies. We did some engine studies also, but I will not discuss that. And I will talk only about the flame studies and what you know that diesel engines, you must be hearing or reading in the papers, Supreme Court banned diesel taxis, and earlier they banned no new diesel cars would be registered in Delhi. So there is something real and something kind of paranoia, about the diesel engines, that they are so bad that you have to ban them. And the major consideration is the particulates or emissions. And soot is of course, is combustion generated, but total particulate structure, as you know, is a little different. A lot of other things get absorbed and due to condensation as the temperature decreases of the burned gases, exhaust gases. So hydrocarbons and including some sulfates, if the fuel has got sulfur, they all get condensed on the soot core, and that is what we call particulate. What we talk particulate, which is the pollutant which the public is exposed to. So, but the diesel is the most efficient engine as available today to the people. You may be, some of you who are aware of the engines, its brake thermal efficiency of about 45% is supposed to be very high. As an engine don't have that kind of brake thermal. But you would be interested to know that some super heavy truck engines are being developed in America. I think for the 4 companies, the US Department of Energy has given the challenge, or challenge means all the targets, the develop engines which will give 55% braking efficiency. First stage 50, they call super heavy truck engines. First target is 50%, which already has been achieved, and next target is 55%, which is nearly achieved. At least it has been achieved by one of the 4 companies. I think the Cummins is one, and then Volvo, and the two more companies.
Eaton is there. Eaton is there.
What that?
Eaton.
Eaton.
Eaton is there. There are 4 companies.
Eaton does not make the engines. Eaton is only supporting.
Yes, sir, it's not
He is only supporting, not to some of the companies.
Yes.
So the two I remember, the one is the Cummins, and there is Volvo,
Caterpillar.
Third maybe Caterpillar, and there is some. Anyway, this is all you can search some Google and then you can find out super heavy truck. So there are 4 companies, and one of them have developed, already achieved 55%. It's mostly, a large chunk of this comes from other areas and not really combustion improvement. Because combustion improvement, going to the super high, what do you call, supercharging, or the turbocharging, very high pressures and all that, and very high injection pressures. Everything has gone to help in doing that. But other than the waste heat recovery, exhaust gas, a lot of it goes waste. How to make use of that? So that's one big area, and then reducing friction, and of course the trucks streamlining and all those things, capacity process. Anyway, so what I mean to say that diesel engine has to survive, and so for that soot has to be minimized, if not completely eliminated. And for your interest, this particulate or particulate emissions, it is not entirely soot in that case, but there are a lot of other volatile substances, volatile hydrocarbons. Many of you must have already heard that direct injection gasoline engines, and already almost 20-30% of the production engines have been replaced by the, in short, you can call GDI, gasoline direct injection engine. They have been replaced the PFI engines, which are normal engines, multi-port fuel injection engines and PFI. They have been replaced by the GDI engines. And already more than 50% of the manufacturers in America offer that as an option. You want to buy a car with a GDI or you want to buy a car with PFI? 50% of the models is available. And due to its benefits of high fuel efficiency, higher than the PFI engine, it is expected that by the year 2020 or so, more than 90% engines in America would be selling with GDI engines. But then there is a problem. The GDI engines also emit particulates. And for that, Europeans have already, Euro 6 standards, not only for diesel, but also for GDI engines, SI engines also they have particulate emission standards, 5 milligrams per kilometer. For cars, 0.005 grams, means 5 milligrams. So it's a pretty tough standard. So what I mean to say, so the study of soot formation remains of interest, whether it's a diesel engine or it's a GDI engine. So this study we did to understand basically that how, say for example, it has been hypothesized or has been, kind of not hypothesized but proposed that suppose we had some hydrogen, can it improve the soot emissions? Can it reduce soot emissions? How far it can reduce? There have been studies, which in the engines which claim that you put in some fumigate in the intake manifold, small amount of hydrogen, and it can reduce emissions of soot considerably. So is that a, one I think that is a practical proposition is one thing, but then also see that whether it's really you obtain benefits, but then what are the reasons for these benefits? At what stage the hydrogen affect? The formation stage or it's the oxidation stage? So some studies have been done on using other fuels like ethylene or methane, and we thought that acetylene, the acetylene is a precursor. Okay, this I will talk. That acetylene is a precursor in soot formation, that. That how the soot will form in combustion. And due to breaking of the molecules of fuel molecules, cracking of the fuel molecules under high temperature pressure conditions, some acetylene is formed. And acetylene then the basic reaction of acetylene polymerization is forming benzene. And then these benzenes, a large number of them are fused together and form the basic particle of the soot nucleus. They form the soot nuclei, and then further growth is also taken place due to deposition of the acetylene on that. That has been one theory, and also supported by some experimental observations. So we thought that let us use one intermediate and see that possibly we will be having a better idea that what hydrogen does to that. So what are the formation mechanism of soot? Some of you may be aware already, but let us go to that one by one. First step is soot nucleation. Says soot nuclei has to form. These nuclei are submicronic. Even say something about 1 nanometer, 1 to 2 nanometer size nuclei has to form. This 1 to 2 nanometer particle also contains thousands of carbon atoms. So that has to form, and potential precursor for that are typically polyacetylenes, this structure. Then species like this, many species, polyenes, and also polyaromatic hydrocarbons. Polyaromatic hydrocarbons are more than when you say more than 2 benzene rings. So this is one typical say PAH molecule. Of course, you have to have okay. So you have to have the benzene ring has to be the structure has to have the benzene rings. So that is the benzene rings fused together. Inside you will have only carbon atoms, only outside you have hydrogen attached here. Okay. So these, when a few hundred rings like this are fused together, then it forms the nuclei. But that's one theory, and it has been seen that some of the studies they produce this kind of particles. The next stage is coagulation. These nuclei, in fact, they are at that high temperatures, more than about 3000 to 3500 degree Kelvin, and they are in a semi-solid state. So they can just coagulate together. Two semi-solid particles coming together, and then they coalesce together. So that's one stage. Then the third stage is surface growth. That it has to, you have become now a nuclei, then couple of nuclei fused together, made a little bigger particle. Now this surface grows, means more and more material deposited on that. So proposed is the HACA mechanism. The hydrogen abstraction and C2H2 means acetylene addition. This mechanism has been proposed that this is possibly the most prominent mechanism for surface growth. Then next stage is aggregation. That now these particles, what are called primary particles. The primary particles may be anything from 15 to 30 nanometer size, which particle we call that, say a nuclei has to grow, coils or surface growth, and then becomes a stable primary particle. It can be independent, or they can also aggregate together. A number of them, maybe 30, 40 or maybe 100 particles. These size go together, they are known as aggregates. And then if the temperature is high of the gas, and diesel engines or even in the leaner planes, always excess oxygen is available. So the soot can also oxidize, or it does oxidize. So this is the other mechanism which in fact continues right from here to here. Oxidation continues even from nuclei, oxidation nuclei to coils or coagulated particles, or the surface growth is also taking place, oxidation is also taking place. And what is net? That's what we get outside. Okay. This gives you a present, all the processes starting from nucleation to finally what you get outside, and the time scale that you have got, these are the precursors. This OH is a hydrox radical, etc. They are in fact are oxidation. Then you form the benzene structure. They multiply, form polyaromatic hydrocarbons. Okay. Then they all become finally 1 to 2 nanometers nuclei. Okay. Then they start growing, coagulation, and then they get agglomeration or aggregation. We will discuss that, that physically you obtain like this structure in the soot, and note that these particles should be aggregating something like this. In soot you don't get this kind of aggregation. It's chain like. Okay. What is the HACA mechanism? Just briefly, it is composed of 3 steps. First reaction is that hydrogen atom is removed from an aromatic molecule, and then like this, say suppose you have benzene in the high temperature region. You have now the course of combustion, and so many softwares you must have been talked about, or some of you might have been using Chemkin and whatnot, that in the high temperature region of combustion of hydrocarbons and air, you have a lot of radicals and also atomic hydrogen, atomic oxygen, atomic nitrogen. These all chemical species are present. So this, for example, atomic hydrogen reacts with benzene, strips one hydrogen atom from here, form a radical. This is known as aromatic radical, or can be alkyl radical, and then molecular hydrogen first step. Second step is this aromatic radical on this combines acetylene, which is formed due to cracking of the fuel molecules in combustion, and forms a substance on the side chain of the benzene ring. You will have acetylene attached, and again releases the hydrogen atom. So, this can keep on again used for further step 1, reaction number 1. Then this third step is that this can you have this formed, then this is added another acetylene atom molecule, another one, and then form another ring, on which this is site in which a valency is off, and further aggregation or further deposition starts here. So, these are 2 benzene rings, then 3 and 4 and 5 and more. So, pH are formed, and these pH when become larger and larger molecules, then this becomes the Soot nuclei. This is the mechanism known as HSCA mechanism of surface growth. And okay. Other things are you can say more mechanical in nature and not chemicals, like coagulation and then aggregation. Those other 2 steps are more like say mechanical in nature, that okay, 2 semi-solid substances when they collide, then you can call it at the best physical chemistry, or physics. So, they collide together and form one you can say entity, and once they get little solidified, then aggregation happens only, that one attached other one and the third attached, then fourth attached, and all that, and form like chain. Once they become stable and temperature comes down. What is the oxidation mechanism consists of? It has been hypothesized that oxidation of soot can happen by oxygen molecular oxygen, or also atomic oxygen, which is present in the high temperature gases. But it has been seen that oxidation by OH radical is very important in the fuel rich regions, and when you have diffusion combustion, whether diffusion flames or it is in appliances like gas, like turbines or diesel engines, or now the GDI engines also, there are rich regions, and in that rich region hydroxyl radical is available in plenty, and it has been seen that this plays very, very important role. And Fenimore and Jones gave this equation for the W is the rate of oxidation, gram of carbon per centimeter square of surface of the particles per second. This is expressed like this. So, this the other mechanisms also have been given. We will compare them, that how the different mechanisms predict the combustion, the oxidation rates. So, it has been then thought or proposed that when hydrogen you add to the fuel, then there is a possibility that there will be more hydroxyl radicals present in the combustion gases. and then that can promote a higher rate of oxidation compared to when the fuel is there without additional hydrogen. So, whether that is true or not, we will see. Okay. So, this has been also observed in, for example, methane air flames, that there is a and it has been seen, in the flame region, that at a certain stage in the flame, when the flame will go that flame say where it is starting and then somewhere in between, there is a high concentration of hydroxy radical. You have the techniques like chemiluminescence technique, which has been employed to detect the concentration of hydroxy radical in the combustion zones. And as the flame height increases, you go and find out the hydroxy radical concentration. This reduces. Soot density also reduces, and hydroxyl ion concentration also reduces. So, this is a corroborative evidence that hydroxy radical plays an important role. Basically, three mechanisms have been in vogue. Anybody deals here with the diesel engine combustion? Okay. So, you must have been soot oxidation NSC mechanism. This is the Nagle-Stickland. Okay. That's a long time back, I think 1960s, 68, 69, 70, around that, for oxidation of those soot formed in at the time, the soot, in fact the carbon soot is also an industrial product. It is required, I don't know where it is required, but it's a soot is an industrial product. It is manufactured using petroleum substances. You form the soot and sell it for industry somewhere where it is used. And so, you also study the soot mechanism, its oxidation mechanism and all that in the process, whether in the process I hope it does not get oxidized. So, these Nagle-Stickland Constable, there are three Nagle-Stickland Constable. So, these mechanism, they propose a mechanism using as graphite is being oxidized. Suppose this is a graphite particle. This is a graphite particle, then it is attacked, for example, by oxidation. Suppose this has been attacked by oxidation, by oxygen, and it gets oxidized. So, that particular part of the surface would have a different characteristics than the other, which is a nascent surface. So, they went by this kind of proposition that there is a process by which the surface gets first oxidized and get converted to a different characteristics. So, this will have one step. Other step would be that how this surface then further get oxidized. So, then they propose a mechanism. Now, this is a very standard you can find in any textbook, NSC mechanism. And then they propose rate of reactions and all that, and then many of the models soot formation in engines, they still use this mechanism. Standard software you will get this NSC mechanism is still there in that. Then Lee et al. Improved it further, because there he says that if this surface is converted oxidized, then the diffusion oxygen here would be different, then the diffusion oxygen would be in the nascent surface would be different. So Lee said, okay, he made a modification, then oxygen is not limited by diffusion. This oxygen is available with the same rate to both kinds of surfaces. So he modified this, that this is not all the surfaces behave the similar way, because everything is exposed to the environment. These particles are very small, they are rather very small. So entire particle would be more likely exposed to the similar environment. So he removed this distinction with NSC and gave another equation. And then Fenimore, I told that he took hydroxyl radical. They are all taking only oxygen, both the NSC mechanism and Lee mechanism. They use only oxygen as the oxidant. But here Fenimore and Jones use hydroxyl radical. And you can see here these rates, say this is NSC, this is Lee, and this is Fenimore Jones. So this predicts, this is all the oxygen rate is at the logarithmic scale. So this is a pretty high difference. So you have that hydroxyl radical does predict a much higher rate of oxidation than the usual NSC, and I have already talked briefly on that why supplementary fuel people were interested, or as a additive, that hydrogen has got superior combustion characteristics, there's a better ignitability, high diffusivity, it's a small molecule, high flame propagation speed, you all know that is much higher than hydrocarbons, and very wide flammability limits. So it is supposed to promote combustion which is at much higher rate than the hydrocarbons. Let us see that how does addition of hydrogen affect the flame temperatures. It has superior combustion characteristics, so it should increase the the flame temperatures. So these are certain is a work of Dew et al. Of 1995. He used hydrogen and other diluents, inert gases like nitrogen, argon, helium, carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is not a inert gas, but these three are inert gas, and then measured the flame temperature at different you can say this is stoichiometry. They say how much you are adding the moles of these products to the flame. So you can see here this is hydrogen and this is carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide being reactive, carbon monoxide also has got higher speed, higher flame speed. So it also increases temperature. It does not maintains it, even if more carbon monoxide you add, temperature rises slightly. Hydrocarbon you add more hydrogen, it increases very sharply, and all other work as a diluents. More and more of inert gases you add, temperature comes down. So you see that hydrogen has got a very positive effect on flame temperature. So there is one thing that it increases flame temperature, so oxidation should be more natural phenomena.
Is
Yeah.
this
No.
It is already there.
You see, it is like this. When you do these work, then carbon concentration is kept constant. Carbon and carbon and oxygen concentration kept constant. It does not change. You only add. Say for example, you replace nitrogen. Okay. See, means you keep the basic stoichiometry same, only you add them additionally. Otherwise, it will all make no sense, say. Now, see here that in the study, 96, that if you add hydrogen, SVF is a soot volume fraction. It is a gross parameter. How much soot is contained per meter cube or per centimeter cube, depending on what units use, milligrams per centimeter cube or grams per meter cube. So, is in a ppm. ppm is say here would be mass by volume. Okay, this ppm is mass by volume ppm, because soot is not soot we consider not volume, soot we consider mass, and the gas by volume. And you can see here that ethylene is, say this is along the flame and measured at the axis. If you have flame, so you measure along the axis. So, you see here that the peak concentration, this is when you have ethylene and hydrogen, okay, and this one is the more hydrogen, this is hydrogen is smaller, and this is helium. So, you have helium, of course, is not doing anything, no reactions, it is an inert gas. But if you add helium, say this is still lower than the pure ethylene, but hydrogen has got if you add hydrogen, there is a fairly significant reduction in peak concentration of the soot. What could be the effect of hydrogen, for example? Possible effect, when the dilution, thermal and direct chemical interaction. The dilution effect is that, okay, we are adding a hydrogen, then is it the gases are being say diluted, means concentration of hydrogen in the stoichiometry is increasing. Say suppose like you have CH4 fuel or you have C2H24, C2H2, then per molecule of in one case you have every carbon atom is attached with only one hydrogen, like acetylene. But methane, there are 4 hydrogen atoms for every carbon atom. So, that we known as the dilution effect, that it is diluting the carbon concentration itself. Is that the effect? Or is the thermal effect, means is it because the high temperatures are obtained, so high temperatures of the flame, then can it increase the oxidation rate due to temperature alone? And chemical interaction is that, okay, you produce more hydroxyl radicals or you produce more hydrogen atoms. Say more hydrogen atoms means you can have, does it accelerate the shoot growth due to HCM mechanism, or is the more hydroxyl radical increase oxidation? Net effect, so that is the chemical effect. So, the three effects, three way it can be predicted to do. So, basically the thermal and direct chemical interaction effect are supposed to be the dominant effect and not the dilution effect. You see here that we have been talking of hydroxyl radical is important. Can the hydrogen increase concentration of hydroxyl radicals? These are show some measurements of the hydroxyl radical signal intensity and different percentage of hydrogen added to the system by volume, the whole volume. So, you can say this is no hydrogen and the hydrogen increasing. So, you see that in the flame you have seen that hydroxyl radical concentration increases as you put in or add more and more hydrogen. So, that has been shown to be true. By adding hydrogen does increase hydroxyl radical concentration, and Fenimore and Jones oxidation mechanism should be now being should be dominant. Okay, then what we in seeing this background, so I will now, maybe you like to take a break now or a little later. Okay, I think a little later we will take a. I already talked about this, no, that that's what we did in at this institute. What we used, two types of flames we use. One is a normal diffusion flame and then inverse diffusion flame. Using acetylene air system, what is normal diffusion flame? Let's see that. This is a normal diffusion flame, that you have fuel coming through an innermost port. If you see, this is a burner here, you have one port, this, then there are concentric rings around. So, another is this concentric ring around this. This is this hashed thing is the a wall, a cylindrical whole cylindrical or a tube, and then there is a third port. Okay. So, when the fuel goes from the inner port, and this is shown for the inverse diffusion. Okay. If the fuel instead of this acetylene and hydrogen goes through this port and air goes from here, then it becomes a normal diffusion. Here is the fuel, surrounding air goes through a surrounding ring, hollow ring, and outside it is a nitrogen shield, so that this not influenced by atmospheric oxygen. You see, if you don't put a nitrogen shield around the flame, then atmospheric oxygen also would be interacting. So, to mask those that influence, in these studies a nitrogen shield is also put outside. So, this is normal diffusion. Most of the burners would be like this. Okay. The inverse diffusion flame is you put air inside and fuel in the surrounding ring, air inside and the fuel is around it, and the nitrogen shield. So, what is the difference between the two? That here oxygen is diffusing into the flame from this side, and then flame is concentrated, all the products are concentrated here, all the combustion gas is concentrated here, soot is also concentrated here, and then is rising, and the soot is getting oxidized. As it rises, soot gets oxidized, and of course, then it starts cooling, and then oxidation stops. Then here the flame gets terminated. Okay. So, what you get, that the particles remain the highest possible temperature region. Highest temperature regions are here only. Okay. And so, the most of the product travel through the highest possible region in the flame. So, all the chemical reactions would be taking place. So, at the end you get the matured soot particles, which has gone through all process including oxidation. Ultimately, you get the matured soot particles. What happens in the inverse diffusion flame? That here is the air and here is the fuel. So, air is diffusing outwardly. So, then what would happen? That once soot particles are formed, then due to air being in the core, it removes them towards the periphery, and so they get cooled. So, what do you get? That most of the particles, if you study along this line, say here we make a study like along the center line like this, here we make a study along the center of this ring. Center, not center means the midway between this ring, hollow ring. So, along this study the, for example, soot structure, soot volume fraction, and these will not be. So, the fuel coming from here, say the particles coming out of from here would be just which have been just formed. From here there will be some little bit midway and like this. So, you can see that how along the length of the flame particle size is changing. So, that way you can say from the incipient particles initially formed, incipient and not. So, inward diffusion flame are good to study the combustion of soot or the soot formation early in the flame. You get better idea than the normal diffusion flame. It's just pictures of and this is the inverse diffusion flame looks like, little broader all through, because air is coming from the center and then diffusing outwardly, and this is normal diffusion flame, is more conical. Normal diffusion flame is more conical, and this is something like cylindrical. I have already talked about this now. That is for initial particles and structure, while this for mature stage. the soot formation. Okay. I already discussed that. What we studied here, primary soot particle size, soot volume fraction and aggregate size, how big these particles become, and then does hydrogen influence them in the aggregate size, and fourth is fractal dimension. Does it change the nature of the aggregation? It is not like it's a chain like formation and not something like this. No, this is not observed. So, but does it change to what extent? If it changes, to what extent? So, these four basic structural parameters were studied. What kind of technique was used? So, there are several techniques, right starting again the diesel engine people knowing, this study on the soot formation started long time back, something around 1963, 64. There was those classic research by W.M. Scott. Of Ricardo engineers. There are famous papers, you can find the SAE transactions, those papers. They had, they did the high speed photography of diesel engine combustion. You imagine, in those period, there was a high speed camera, and there are very interesting papers, the people who they want to study that, say technically as well as the way he writes about his research. So, high speed camera, at the time, they used to have just high speed camera and, yards and yards of film reel would be exposed in no time. And then you have to manually analyze that, putting on a projector and and then analyze with that. Unlike today softwares are available, In fact, you don't even record on the film. You just digitally record everything. At the time used to be flame. In fact, even as late around that period, even simple pressure time history also, we used to from oscilloscope, put a camera to it, expose the films, then on the projector you enlarge it, trace it, measure ignition delay, measure the rate of pressure rise, measure the peak pressure, manually do that. Today you have got software, you have no time, you press a button, you get every data. So there's a big, so that fellow, the first thing, one of the very significant conclusions from his that combustion photography in the diesel engines is that even soot is formed right in the early stages of combustion, because he said, these are the soot clouds. As soon as the combustion begins, he observed that there are soot clouds. It's only what you get out is the result of formed right in the beginning, and what you get oxidized. That was his very significant observation. You can call it qualitatively now, but you see amount of effort that man would have put. In fact, he concludes his paper by saying that my situation was like a pelican, a bird, pelican who has who has bitten more than what it can chew. There's so much of, I think the miles of film I exposed, and you see how do I analyze them, so I have bitten more than I can chew. So Means so this started from that, and then as the your techniques, technology kept on improving, then right in late 90s or mid 90s, Sandia Labs. Then this there's a famous DEC, DEC, DEC and colleagues, he in fact did research on the diesel engine spray combustion and optical engine, and a few of the things he reversed what people had earlier thought of. His findings were exactly reverse of that. One of his findings that was that it is soot is nuclear formed in the pre-mixed, we always talk the soot is formed in the diffusion flames. The soot is formed always in the rich pre-mixed region, soot nuclei. Of course, concentration is high on the diffusion flame boundaries, they are the highest concentration, but formation is right in the premixed region. That is a very significant finding. Some people said difference of opinion that maybe in the highly turbocharged, supercharged engines this is the behavior, but may not be true in the naturally aspirated engines anyway. But we have only the what you call supercharged engines now. So DEC findings it still remains important. So that's so there are different techniques, like laser induced. They use laser induced incandescence. There are the light extinction, scattering, laser induced fluorescence, thermophoretic sampling. Okay, these are several techniques. This use laser, use optical engines, so you can use that. You can use the flames also. This technique is basically that when laser is focused on a region, then the flame, so the laser increase the temperature of the soot particles to about 4000 degree Kelvin. Soot particle temperature goes to by about LII. While the particles which are not heated, the temperature would be something of the order of non laser heated would be something like 2200 Kelvin, something of that order. So these particles would have a different radiations. The radiations, the frequency would be different, and while from there will be different. So how much seeing from again the fundamental laws of physics, that how much time it will take to heat, and then how then heat is being, how they are decaying, decaying this from or decaying. So that will depend also on the surface area and on the size. On the size will depend, on the size would be a surface area, size and numbers. On the size and numbers, the surface area would depend. So from that back correlation, you determine what would be the particle size and what would be the soot volume fraction, average particle size, and what would be the soot volume fraction. So, that technique laser, this is of interest, thermophoretic sampling, which we use coupled with the transmission electron microscopy. This is a non-intrusive technique. This is intrusive technique, that you physically sample the soot particles from the flame, then take electron microscope, scan, on say electron microscopy, you then scan those images and then you analyze that. So, this is another technique which can be applied to flames. This cannot be applied to diesel engine combustion. You cannot introduce a sampling method and take it out. Yeah.
Say, from a diffusion flame, if I am basically taking out particles at some locations,
Yes.
so it will get cooled. So the composition of structure will be same when I take it to experiment.
That is the technique's fundamental principle. That the temperature difference create a potential, so that these particles drift to this colder surface, and then they get stuck to it, and then you remove them immediately. Say, I will explain that. This. I will explain. That's an interesting question. That's the fundamental principle of that. Let me just. So this is a thermophoretic technique, that this is the temperature, cooler temperature. The theory is that in a hot region, if you put a cooler collecting you can say probe, then due to this there will be a potential generated, and these particles drift and get deposited on that. So this shows you can search and you can find out what are the potential and all that. Then if you can have that thing, then you combine, take the photograph, electron microscope from that, and then you can get all this information. Let us, so there are TM grids available, which are about 3 millimeter diameter, and is a 200 mesh, 200 cells per square inch, per square centimeter. The 200 cells per square centimeter, very, very, very small, grids, and then is a copper coated or copper wires, and then this is sampled from the middle of the reaction zone along the flame height. Sampling time is kept from 45 to 80 milliseconds. That is important, because if you keep it for longer period, there are two problems. One is that multiple layers of particles would be deposited. The chances of multiple layers of particles are deposited there, and then you will not be able to get a good photograph. The electron microscope, the multiple layers are there, then you cannot individually identify neither individual particles nor individual aggregates. So, and the other thing is that if it get heated, other thing that is for long, then get heated. So it does not serve the good purpose. So you have to have very small period. It has been seen that if the probe remains only about 45 to 80 milliseconds, then you get the best results of this using this technique. This I already told that in the studies you keep the acetylene rate and air flow rates, so that you keep the same number of carbon density. We got carbon density per unit volume of the gas remain the constant, so that it is not that I am putting hydrogen or additional diluent and I am reducing the carbon density. So then I would get lower soot volume fraction. So that was one. This shows that this is a tweezer, and on the tip of this held this grid. This is the this is the enlarged view of the grid. A tweezer is held on this, and this is operated by a double acting solenoid valve, this double acting pneumatic cylinder on this, and then in this double acting cylinder, using air compressor and then you just and timer, the tweezer goes to the middle of this thing, and then it's pulled back. The time is recorded on a for calibrating on an oscilloscope, and see it by using the right amount of air compressor and the timer, that it remains inside only for 40 to 80 milliseconds. And along the height, the probe was made to traverse, and these samples were drawn. They are all for the fuel through in the burner, that supplying the acetylene and air and hydrogen, and the surrounding nitrogen shield, to protect it from the atmospheric oxygen. You can have, say, if you are interested in more details, a paper, means I am taking our paper. There must be there are a number of other papers as well. This is in combustion and flame of March 2007, volume 148. Okay. This is Pandey and Panigre. Okay, that's it. So, want more details on this, you can see that other part also I would this is only for that sampling system itself, how you record its operation time and all that, and calibrate it, what kind of air pressure you should use and all that. Then you then take the photographs at 8,000 magnification, 15,000 magnification. For soot volume fraction, you can have the photograph which are not so enlarged, but for particle size, the photograph at 80,000 magnification, and then see the individual particles. There are softwares available for image analysis. Okay. You will have a copy of this presentation. This is and as I told you, you can have more details on that. It shows the photographs. Photograph means from the electron microscope. Just shows that this is at 15,000 in an inverse diffusion flame. You are like just acetylene, and this is hydrogen has been, some hydrogen has been put, is shown the composition here. You see, this is the kind of, visibly you can see that when you hydrogen, then you had less soot volume fraction. Okay. But there are hundreds of photographs were taken like this, so I am just giving a sample photograph here. This is for at 15,000 magnification, where you can evaluate it for soot volume fraction. For particle size and aggregates at this shows the dimension 100 nanometer, and you can see here this the aggregates look like when you are just acetylene, and these are just when is hydrogen, because concentration have reduced quite a bit. So, you get this kind of image of soot aggregates. Okay. For individual particle size, it was done physically, sitting on a they taking the photograph and then on a microscope, then measure individual particles. For example, which you can separate this particle is independent. No? So, locate such independent particles 10, 15, measure their size and then take the average. So, the average particle size. So, individually you identify that. So, that was the particle size, primary particle size measurement method. You see here for the NDF, okay, this is there is no hydrogen addition. This is for and here is the hydrogen addition. You can see at the two different heights is shown the is shown at two different heights, 80,000 magnification NDF. You see here 5 millimeter height means flame, just in the beginning, and at 20,000. So, you can see itself that that itself gives an idea that concentration is increasing, is growing, SVF is growing. Particle size, we will see the particle size also getting a little larger. From 5 millimeter you can see into the particle also, say you have the impression that the particles are somewhat larger, if you can see that some individual particles, and density of soot in any case has increased. So, these are kind of photographs were taken and then they were analyzed, and this this shows temperature profile in the flame with the time how the temperature recording, because you have to measure the temperature for analysis of the soot volume fraction. You need what is the flame temperature. Okay. So, that also you have to measure the flame temperature, and flame temperature, then you have to you cannot put a thermocouple all the time there, it will disturb the flame. So, you have to measure again by along the height, you measure flame temperature, put the thermocouple inside and then bring it out, and then go to the different height, then measure temperature, and then go to third temperature. So, you measure and each type of flame, what I mean, the different flow rates of hydrogen and acetylene. So, you measure this temperature profile, but you must know that when the temperature becomes stable. So, that time taken like is about 30 at about 30 to 40 seconds you put inside, and then only you measure temperature, because it increases and then becomes somewhat stable. So, here you take and then you measure the temperature, then do lot of corrections to it, correction for the conduction, all that. So, everything you correct. Conduction is more important than the other radiation, etc., and find out the flame temperature. Then okay, so you have then I will not I will just show you that in this has been also Coelho in this paper, but then this has been also given in our paper, that how do you calculate the aggregate size. Okay. Then number of n is the number of each aggregate, and aggregate size means number of primary particles in that. So this all is explained there. You can see that there all this simple mathematics, Soot volume fraction, how do you calculate, okay, in aggregate size. Then fractal dimensions. Fractal dimension is basically is a measure that how round is the object. Like it's more volume and surface index, volume by surface index. For example, for a sphere the fractal dimension is 3, for cylinder it is 2. Okay. So that's so tells what kind of the solid, what kind of structure it has got. It's a roundish, or it is cylindrical, or it is not that like a chain. So that's the basic. Okay. So this I will not go in. Now let me talk with some results. This is a temperature, flame temperatures. You have this is for IDF flame. This is without hydrogen, and this is with hydrogen. So you can see that flame temperature has gone up anything from 200 to 300, 200 to 3, in fact 400. This is say about 200, sorry, 1650, and this is about 200 to 250 degree Celsius is the maximum temperature difference you can get with in a hydrogen flame. So that's one. Okay, it's I wrote maximum temperature is about and maximum temperature is anything from about 10 to 20 millimeter height of the flame, and then it start decreasing under 50 to 200 degree Kelvin or centigrade higher temperatures. Okay. Initially, of course, a large difference, then naturally gets cooled and all that. So maximum temperature difference is around 10 to 20 millimeter height. For NDF also similar behavior, maximum temperature difference about 200, increase in temperature is somewhat lesser. Okay. This is like a 1500 or 1650, so about 100 degree. So here the temperature difference is less, means the temperature increase is less with hydrogen in NDF. Soot volume fraction is the first gross parameter, soot volume fraction. So you can see here that this is the soot volume fraction without hydrogen, and if you take something like average about 0.2 ppm, varies of course from 0.15 to 0.25, the average take of 0.2, with the hydrogen addition it less than half, lower than 0.1. So it can be 50% or more decrease is possible with the hydrogen addition of 3 to 5%. Of course, higher hydrogen will give you still higher soot reduction. NDF maximum concentration is sizable difference. One thing you see here, soot volume fraction in an IDF maximum is about 0.25 and in NDF is almost 6 times, 1.5, 5 to 6 times higher, because here the particles are from the core, then they move outwards, because the IDF air is in the center. So this takes out the particles, so they don't grow. They don't grow further. And whatever the nuclei are formed in the beginning, no further nuclear, say even the nucleation is reduced. So the soot volume fraction becomes fairly low. Here the hydrogen effect is there, but difference is only about 1 to 3 maximum, of 0.5 to about 1.5. There is a higher, about 1/5 or 1/6. Here it is about 1/3, lower soot. Primary particle size. Primary particle size about say without hydrogen about 25 nanometers, and here you can say about 15 to 20 nanometers. So particle size are smaller with hydrogen. So this growth may not be that it reduces growth. That is possibly is not the reason, because other evidences support that it possibly increases the oxidation, because temperatures are higher, about 200 degree Kelvin higher temperatures. So that increases the soot oxidation. And other appliances also you have corroborative evidence. For example, like diesel engine, any measure you take to increase temperatures, combustion temperatures, like advanced injection timing, you will reduce soot, you will reduce smoke. It will increase NOx, but it will reduce smoke. So that is basically the temperature effect. So here I already told you 12 to 20 average particle size. I already said about with the hydrogen it's a very smaller particles. So it reduces particle size. So which is the oxidation is, as I told you, is more important. Say here, sorry, I took the result of the NDF, because in IDF, as oxidation, that's the reason why IDF and NDF both studies are important, because IDF oxidation is reduced, possibility of oxidation is reduced, because particle is made to kind of move outwards. So temperature region, the zone, the temperature, it drifts to a zone which is a lower temperature. So that means there must be something to do with the surface growth. That hydrogen addition can also affect the surface growth. So this reduces surface growth, as there is a temperature is lower, so oxidation is not promoted. So this result must be due to lower surface growth due to addition of hydrogen. So that this is IDF studies support that hydrogen also curbs the growth of the surface growth of the soot particles. And because in NDF all the particles remains in the high temperature zone, because we are moving all along the fuel, the air is outside and fuel is inside. So all the particles continue to remain in so they are all subjected to surface growth as well as oxidation. So it results into that hydrogen may be curbing surface growth, but it remains in the high temperature region. So oxidation is also is very prominent here. So you are not able to distinguish whether hydrogen is supporting particle growth or not particle growth. So that individual particle size is not affected. They are practically the same size. Very, very little difference, not that much dramatic difference as in the IDFs. What about the aggregate size? The number of particles, primary particles to an aggregate, basically very little difference. There is less number of particles compared to without hydrogen, but difference is not very dramatic. In IDF, at least there is some differences there. Here about at least 4 to 5 particles are lesser, and aggregate size is also smaller. If you see NDF, for example,
Sir, in IDF, because the particles are flowing out.
yeah. So agglomeration is less.
So how sensible would it be to look at aggregate size? We should be looking at primary particle size.
Say primary particles are smaller, that we have seen. Primary particles are here only about 15, 20 nanometers, while in NDF particle size are larger. That is one thing. And secondly, see, aggregation is a function of also the soot density or number of particles, because the aggregation is proportional to n square. Rate of aggregation because this depends on the collision among the particles and is proportional to n square. So if the number of particles itself is less, so the aggregation also would be lesser. So that's one reason for smaller aggregate size in IDF. So see here there we said 10, 15, here it can go up to 40, mostly 20 and more. So their aggregate size is larger than the IDF and the NDF. The one thing is there that with the hydrogen also aggregate size is smaller, and the region again is not too specifically, I think it should be more the function of n, number of n, number of particles or particle density per unit volume. With the hydrogen, as we have seen that because the soot volume fraction is lower, so the rate of aggregation is also reduced. So, this is the indirect effect of hydrogen, and note that hydrogen has to do something to do with the collision frequency and all that. The fractal dimension, I will already told you that like a sphere would have a fractal dimension of 3, cylinder would have 2. It shows the different kind of aggregates you take, and like this has a fractal dimension of 2.2, this is 2, this shape is 1.7, this shape has 1.4. Just to give an idea, and what we get for the soot whether IDF or NDF along with the flame height, you get something 1.6 to 1.8. So, you can say average about 1.7, and you can say that hydrogen makes no difference in the fractal dimension, the nature of aggregate. It makes the difference in the size of aggregate. Size of aggregate is smaller, but not the nature. As you have seen also in those micrographs, that all look like chain like structure, something something like that. They all micrographs I showed you the sample micrograph, they all looked something of this nature. Anyway, this shows here at typical flame height of 20, just an overall comparison between where we are saying the incipient particles in IDF and matured particles in NDF. You can see the soot volume fraction is much higher, and primary particle size are smaller in IDF because they are drifted to the low temperature region, and I already told you all these results. Okay, let me just summarize that. What are the about 30% smaller particle size in IDF you obtain, means incipient particles with hydrogen are smaller, because in IDF we get only incipient particles, they are not allowed to grow. But if they are allowed to grow, more deposition of material on that can take place, they remain in the high temperature region, then hydrogen addition does not make difference to particle size. Particle size would remain practically the same, primary particle size. SVF, soot volume fraction is lower by about 75%, means it can be as low as just one fourth of, you can go up to 1/4 of the soot volume fraction without hydrogen. Soot aggregate sizes are smaller in IDF, while from about 40 particles to about 15, and it's all a function of lower SVF, because IDF we have seen the SVF itself is about 1/5, 1/6 of the NDF. Aggregate size is smaller, and fractal dimension means the nature of aggregate is similar, chain like. Okay, I think this is all I would like to now. Any questions? What is the purpose? Giving the idea, that okay, what are the primary particle sizes? You can expect of the suit. What kind of structures? It's a chain-like structure in most of the aggregates, and whether it's practical or not. But if you add hydrogen, then some benefits can be derived, and it's primarily we planned in fact that if we can measure the hydroxyl radical concentration with hydrogen, without hydrogen, and link it with that, but money is always a problem. We are talking on the experimental setup. Money is always a problem to get funds and all that. So, and sometime it takes the sponsor also lot of convincing. Yes, this is useful. Let us sponsor it. Whether it's the institute is the sponsor or the DST or other sponsors. Okay, any questions? Yeah.
You are taking measurements using that grid, small grid. You tell like 50 microsecond is the time when you take the measurement.
Yeah.
So you are bringing something very fast to the flame and taking back. So because of that, the flame structure may change.
No. You see, it's a very small. This is the point. Is that's very very small. It's like a needle. You see, it's like a very thin, of course, 3 millimeter. Of course, 3 millimeter size, but it's not going like this. It's going flat. No, it's put in the flat, not like this. So it is and goes very fast. So about 40-50 milliseconds. So in that, yes, some intrusion technique can be expected that it might, but I think it's not significant, because it is whatever has formed, it will collect it, and whatever is has now created it's after effect, it is not bothered. And we are also not bothered, because whatever it has collected, and it has to be fast, because temperature is the driving force. So it should be cold outside, and the cold thing goes inside the hot region, then only it captures certain particles. As I told, thermophoretic means that principle. So whatever it has after effect, so we are not bothered about that, because means how far this, from the flame it would be yes, it's a couple of centimeters, it's outside, say that shroud. You means see, there is a nitrogen shield, and after that there is a also a physical cover, so that in the say the room you have other things, they should also not maybe there is some for example you are moving, you are working there, you are moving, and that disturbs the air, and it also disturbs the flame. So that flame should remain absolutely stable, and so there is a physical cylindrical cover also outside. So it is just close to that. So that is yes. Okay.
Sometimes I read that there can be fragmentation as well, additional to the processes, surface reaction, oxidation. These all processes, it's easier to understand. Can you give
Say fragmentation reactions.
I think the soup particles can fragment. It's difficult to imagine how the formed particles can fragment. Did you observe any such things?
See, fragmentation You mean the soot particles split into two and it has been reported somewhere under what kind of conditions, because the low temperature, because the flames is a low temperature, no, low pressure, sorry. What we study is the low pressure, is the atmospheric pressure.
That's it, very high pressure.
So at very high pressures it could be possible, and but flames, nobody has reported that, means this atmospheric flames, unless in the high pressure systems are like, you have got super charged engines and all that. I say I have not come across that, frankly speaking.
I have one more. So, while explaining LII, you said or TM.
Yeah. TM.
I'm not saying TM. So, if I have an LII image,
Yes.
maybe we can process it to get the volume fraction of soot. So, is it also possible to get the particle information from that image, or we need to have TM for that?
No, particle size, as I told you, LIII is a based, what you call reverse mathematics, that you assume, see, most of these particle size determinations of these techniques, you develop the softwares by assuming this is the particle size, this is the density. So, particle size would give you at what rate, it gets heated and then cools off. Okay. Rate of cooling would depends on the particle size and surface area and volume. And then overall intensity of the light would give you total concentration, that becomes soot volume fraction. So, when you measure the two things, one is the total intensity, the incandescence, you measure that. Other thing is at what rate is decaying. So, the decay rate gives you the particle size and total intensity gives you the soot volume fraction. So, all these softwares, particle size determination or the reverse mathematics, you know the physics and you fit, if I have this thing, then I should get this. So, they are generally, what you call fundamental principle based, and they do not even need calibration. If your mathematics is correct, which is correct, yeah, you get both. You get both.
Number, just the average number of particles per particular. So, is it possible? Has anyone ever measured for a particular Frank angle the size distribution and things like that? Or is it even possible to think of?
No, this is possible. It's question of that how much, what is the purpose? You see, question is that what exactly is the purpose? Because it's all these experiments are very expensive. You see that DAX couple of papers, the 90s and later on also the Sandia people have been working. So you read their papers, and then how much effort it goes, and then what exactly is your objective. Because if you see the basic mechanism, okay, then when you are working on a spray, it has been done, it has been, DAX paper you see, it says after injection 4 degrees cranking angle after that, 8 degrees after that, 10 degrees after that, 12 degrees after that. He has all the data is given, he has done analyze. That is what you are asking?
No. I have seen all those papers.
Yeah.
That they give the soot volume fraction or the
Part-
average number.
or average number, yeah.
Asking, is it possible to have the size distribution at a particular Frank angle? That's what I know that
the size distribution. You see, you have seen one is that what happens in the spray, and the other thing is what happens now subsequently. Once the combustion has been completed, then what is the particle size? That is what you are interested, or in the spray you are interested? Size distribution.
Not spray, sir. The particle, food particle.
Uh, no, in the spray, the particle, what the either the soot nuclei are forming in the spray, in the burning. Okay, you are interested outside. Outside, once
The spray has burned.
no, once they are formed,
Yeah, solid particles have formed. At the exhaust, I know many people have measured the solid soot particle size.
No, you can measure that. You can measure that. You can use LII. You can measure that.
From LI images, I can extract information of size.
You possibly can. I am not sure, but you possibly can. And there are some distribution. Particles, there are no, say, LIF is another technique. Let us induce fluorescence. That is used for particle size. If it is used, LIF is used, for spray atomization, droplet size, it can be used for this particle size as well. LIF can be used for this as well. So long as you know the technique, how to impart fluorescence to it. There is a technique, LIF can be used. LIA possibly cannot be used for distribution, because it would result into means because decaying it will take some average particle size. In decaying it will take average particle size. Mathematics would be too complicated. So but LIF LIF mathematics is developed for because it is used for spray size distribution, both droplet size distribution in sprays. Any other question? Prashad, do you have any more question? Any other question? Maybe this time you are already 1:30. So anyway, if no more question, thank you for listening.